Hello and welcome to RT's special coverage of the second inauguration of President Barack Obama. Today we'll be taking a look back at what has defined President Obama's first term, as well as what lies ahead. From civil rights to foreign policy, we'll dig deep into the real topics and issues that presses the U.S. today. To start off, I want to bring in our panel, RT correspondent Megan Lopez, host of Breaking the Set here on RT, Abby Martin, and our special guest today, Martin Luther King III. Great to have you all here. So, Mr. King, first question, of course, I mean, how does it feel to see the first African-American president be inaugurated into his second term, especially on a federal holiday dedicated to honoring your father?
Well, let me start by basically saying this is a year of significant anniversaries. The 150th anniversary of the signing of the Proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, the 45th anniversary of the Memphis sanitation strike where my father unfortunately was killed, the 45th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign, very, very significant. The 50th anniversary of the letter of the Birmingham jail that my dad wrote, and the 50th anniversary of the March in Washington where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech. So for the president to be inaugurated in this monumental year and on the King holiday is really quite phenomenal. But you know, beyond that, I should say, the fact that he used one of the Bibles that was used was Dad's Bible, and his traveling Bible. So naturally, there's a euphoric kind of feel. But the challenge, and I hope that people, certainly many Americans were inspired today as the president talked about his vision. But I hope that Congress derived the understanding that Congress must work with the president for that vision to come to fruition.
Right. And, you know, President Obama, he's known for kind of his passionate speeches, rallying up the people, his message of unity. He has famously said, you know, there's not red states, there's not blue states, there's not the United States, kind of this message of unity. But here we are, as he is inaugurated into a second term. Congress is very divided. We see these sharp differences between the red states and the blue states. So what do you think about that? Did the president not deliver on this uniting the people, or is this something that just was out of his hands?
No. I think that the American people chose to re-elect him so that he can continue to forge the vision that he has charted for the country. The first term, he was able to get health care passed, which now we've got to figure out how to pay for it, but at least now people will have health care. He also was able to get fairness for all people, so that now across America, many states are beginning to pass, or states are beginning to pass legislation as it relates to gay marriage. There are a number of things that the president still has to do: immigration policy, taking a bold stand on gun control, and I think that's where I think the president is not just trying to lead as his own vision, but this is what I believe the majority of the American people want.
I want to turn now, Mr. King, to something that your father was dedicated to addressing, this issue of poverty in the U.S. I want to take a look at these numbers. Compares 1968 to present day. 1968, of course, the year that your father was assassinated. At that time, there was 25.4 million poor Americans, 11 million poor children. Flash forward to today, there's 46.2 million poor Americans, 16.1 million poor children, and this is at a time that our GDP has tripled. Of course, a disproportionate amount in this statistic are minorities. So do you think that there's been enough to address this problem decades later?
Absolutely not. In fact, people would ask if my father's dream was realized, and I would say there's no question that it has not been. Aspects of the dream have been realized. He wanted to eradicate poverty, racism, and militarism from our society. Militarism, I should say, and violence. We've made great strides in race. We've still got a ways to go, but we've made great strides. But in poverty, we've almost made no progress. So that's one of the things, I think, creating a climate of entrepreneurship, creating the right kind of training, finding a way to retain our young people in our school system so they don't drop out, they get the best primary and secondary education, ultimately so that they can go into the high-tech jobs and earn their rightful place in society. So that is a huge area that we've got to work on as a nation.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
You said yourself, militarism was a huge pillar for Martin Luther King to really advocate against. And I think that's very underreported in our educational system. When we're learning about Dr. Martin Luther King, we learn a lot about the civil liberties aspect, but we don't really hear about his opposition to the Vietnam War and really how strongly he opposed this. Looking at Obama's presidency, how do you feel about just kind of the continuation of this military aggression worldwide?
Well, I think the president inherited a number of wars that were going on, and we're de-escalating troops, bringing troops home. Are we doing enough? Maybe not. Are we curtailing our spending in military? I don't see that happening. I think that also the public has to be engaged. I don't think the public has been engaged enough to say this is what we want to see, because militarism is costing us a substantial amount of our budget. And we certainly want to create a climate for a strong nation, be able to protect our borders. But I certainly feel we spend far too much on militarism, creating weapon systems that if we use them, it's over. So why are we creating them? It makes no sense.
Death and destruction instead of social uplift, what were you going to say?
And bringing the conversation back home, I know that yesterday you were at the MLK Jr. Memorial, your father's memorial service, presenting the wreath with a number of other people, Reverend Jackson, Jamie Foxx, Chris Chucker, who have always kind of supported this cause. And in the speeches, especially the one delivered by Reverend Jackson, I heard him talking about not necessarily a divide between the races so much right now as the divide between the poverty and the rich and the poor.
Yes.
My question to you is, we've heard a lot of people saying that education or gay rights are the new civil liberties movement of our day. In your opinion, is there one that really kind of stands up to the standards of the original civil liberties movement?
Well, I still think the issue centers around economic empowerment. If we create the climate for true economic empowerment of communities, then communities can lift themselves up. When you look at Chicago, it had 506 murders. I assure you that most of those homicides, and over 170 of them were young children. But I guarantee you that if people were engaged in something creative, young people involved in something positive, had a decent job, those numbers would have been lower. If not, and I really believe ideally we have the ability to wipe that out. We live in a nation that constantly promotes violence. 6 out of 10 cartoons are violent. 7 out of 10 video games are blowing up something and shooting something. 6 out of 10 movies that we watch at home are violent, and 6 out of 10 movies we go to the theater and watch are violent. So until we change the culture, we live in a culture of violence that does not allow us to really achieve our own pursuit of liberty, justice, and happiness. I think we've got to change that so that we create a culture of nonviolence. And when we change that paradigm, then I think that the society is better for all people. My dad talked about, in '68, creating a living wage. Now, here we are in 2013, 45 years later, and we're still debating the minimum wage, getting the minimum wage up. There are some communities that have created a living wage. We got to do a better job across the board.
Civil liberties, of course, is something that your father fought for. And many today are saying that these liberties are being threatened or being eroded. One example, National Defense Authorization Act, a very controversial piece of legislation. This allows the government to detain Americans indefinitely. And political activist Dr. Cornel West came out recently saying that Martin Luther King Jr. could have been called a terrorist under this law and could have been detained. What are your thoughts about this and about this law?
I think we were warned by many that essentially as we were attempting to curtail and get to the terrorist, that we were losing our liberties. So the fact of the matter is, yes, we have lost some things. All of us go to the airports. You have to take off more and more. Now,
it's true.
That's funny, but the reality is there's a much bigger concern, and that is, can we in fact protect our citizenry without diminishing their rights? I think we can. And, you know, I think one of the things that we have to learn is you will never be able to address terrorism by creating the climate to terrorize others. You have to treat people with dignity and respect, and like they really are brothers and sisters and human beings. When you treat people that way, most of the terrorism will dissipate. Now, that's not fanaticism. That's a different discussion. Not quite sure how we address that, but I think we can address terrorism. And I think American people have to say we want to have our rights reinstituted. One of the things, just a quick final point. We all have been going through these machines where we hold our hands up. TSA is removing all those machines. And I knew something was wrong when they wouldn't allow my child to go through. I have to go through it, but never do. So I'm saying that if my child, if it's going to hurt my child,
right,
then it might be hurting me. But now they're going to be removed. Just interesting.
Mr. King, really a pleasure to have you here today on this historic day. That was RT correspondent Megan Lopez. Abby Martin, host of Breaking the Set. They'll be back in just a moment, and a very special thanks to our special guest today, Martin Luther King III.